Hey, yo, what's up, guys? We are back for another news episode. Oh, fuck. So much happened this month. I feel like this is the month where the gates of hell opened up, no?
Yeah, it definitely felt like a lot happened, but it was also stuff where, like, if you like a lot of podcasts or just like news, like analyzers said something like during the middle of it, and it's kind of hard to really get a whole lot of insights until the dust is settled in a way too. It's just very chaotic.
It was. It was. I feel like, I don't know, like a lot of just things have been pushing towards conflict, pushing towards, like whatever sense of stability that the world had has been like broken now. And, there's a lot of contradictions that have just been waiting, itching to get out. And this is finally their time to shine, at least a little bit. I mean, I wouldn't say anything has been resolved though fuck. I'm so out of it. In the month of June. But,
Yeah, at least of all the war.
yeah, but, like, what has happened is at least we've gotten a little bit of a testing ground of how these contradictions might be solved. I don't know, or like a little to dip toe into the pool, whatever it's called, you know?
Yeah,
Yeah,
where it's going.
yeah. Starting off, I think, we should really start off with the Israel-Iran conflict. I mean, it was fucking crazy. On, June 12th, Israel launched just this bombastic, uh, strikes on Iran, taking out their top military personnel, taking out top nuclear scientists. They called it a preemptive strike. I mean, common Israeli tactic, do something inflammatory, call it, preemptive. And I feel like there were a lot of factors behind it. First of all, of course, Bibi's got his corruption trial coming up. So I feel like it was just a little bit of an attempt to restore faith back into the Likud party government. There's also the fact that, Israel has always wanted to draw America into a larger regional war, and it was a really good attempt at doing that. And then, of course, I mean, taking out Iran as a regional player, that's beneficial to Israel, making Iran a failed state. Um, and then it just started this back and forth, Iran striking Israel hard with missiles. And Iran essentially showed the world that the Iron Dome doesn't work, right? Like it essentially showed the world that the Israeli invulnerability within the Middle East is nothing. And of course, Israel was very good at hitting civilian targets, like it hit children's hospitals and apartment buildings and things like that. But I feel like Iran came out of this war on top. Oh, what would you say, Henry?
Yeah, I think it reminds me a lot of the very short India-Pakistan war that happened earlier this year, in a lot of different ways. One, because it's sort of I wouldn't say Pakistan, India is necessarily a proxy conflict, but a direct like reopening of an existing conflict, and also the role of missiles and just air power in general seems to be kind of it's sort of a terrifying development in modern warfare. I mean, it's not new. And, certainly back in the days of Saddam Hussein, he was launching Scud missiles at Israel, but not to this effect. And it's pretty terrifying because you can tell that civilians are going to be the victims of this development in warfare, but at the same time, it creates so much more deniability. If your soldiers invade a place and, uh, kill a bunch of civilians, it's pretty damning. But if you just say, well, we sent a bunch of missiles over at these apartment blocks and, we bombed these places and, they know they're going to kill people, but they can always chalk it up to an accident or whatever. So that's pretty disturbing to me. Um, I think in terms of the balance of power, I would say Iran won the war, but you really have to caveat it with a lot of things because the goal of Israel was effectively regime change, effectively to get the Shah, the Shah's like son, or somebody like that in control, or turn it into Syria and just divide it up and get all of the ethnic minority groups to fight and just destroy the country. And obviously, they were extremely unsuccessful at doing that. But it did work in the sense that Bibi and Netanyahu got what he wanted out of it, which is people stopped talking about Gaza. The courts stopped harassing him. He was seen as like a hero by the Israeli public for a couple weeks now. And I'm sure all of that will fade. But what it really speaks to is the willingness of the Israeli government to do this kind of thing to maintain power and control, and then in the Netanyahu family specifically. And it's pretty damning. You have to remember, like, all of the European powers were talking about sanctions. People really focusing on the atrocities of Gaza. Um, and this happened, and the attention hasn't quite fully gone back to Gaza, at least not, amongst the political leadership. You have people like Merz in Germany who are, praising Israel. And at the end of the day, although they were able to accomplish some objectives, Israel's military strategy is usually to try to win, to force a decisive victory quickly. And Iran is not a country where that's possible, number one. And number two, they also like to do decapitation and kill leaders. That's also not a winning strategy because there's lots of very experienced military leaders in Iran, and they can just put them into a new position, and some of them might be even more competent and younger. The other thing they try to do is punish the civilian population. But I think the Iran-Iraq war, which was, extraordinarily punishing to the country, you have brave graveyards in every single village in Iran, dedicated to the people who lost their lives during that war. It's not a country of people who are about to, roll over because they're getting bombed in the way that Israelis are likely to, actually. And so a lot of Israelis are probably going to leave after this. So I think it's a mixed bag.
I think Israel and America really, and America, of course, also struck with their B-2 bombers onto three nuclear sites, Fordo and two others. And honestly, according to Iranian sources, they only set back their nuclear program by like about 1 month, which is like nothing. That, of course, could be some state propaganda, but I'm more inclined to believe the Iranians than America. But well, they had like three goals really. One was to stop the nuclear program because supposedly Iran's building nukes, which of course everybody knew they weren't. Two was regime change, and three was to sort of limit Iran's power as a regional actor. Hezbollah, Ansarullah. I think they have been successful to some extent in limiting Iran's power as a regional actor. Right? They really have struck the axis of resistance really strongly. They've gotten regime change in Syria. And it's not that like Assad was particularly a good asset to the axis of resistance, but Jolani is absolutely the exact opposite, like the worst thing you could possibly imagine for an axis of resistance. They've limited Hezbollah significantly through their infiltration and Mossad, and the pager attacks, and Hezbollah right now is sort of scrambling.
The
Uh,
the other thing is the infiltration of Iran was really pretty extraordinary too.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, they had apparently. I mean, they were openly calling for the assassination of Khomeini, and they were saying they could at any time. So they've clearly got a very good network within Iran. So they have somewhat worked out getting damaging the axis of resistance. It's still there, obviously. I mean, Ansarullah is still strong. Hezbollah is regrouping, and I'm sure they'll get their power back eventually. But their second goal was regime change. And that's so hard to do in a country like Iran, where, from everything I've read, even people in Iran who are pro Western, right, who are anti government, the second Israel struck civilian centers and babies and hospitals, they were immediately like, yeah, this is a war against the Iranian people. This isn't a war against the government. And so even though Netanyahu and Trump, they were like hoping that they strike these people and magically they all come up against the government and they all magically overthrow the regime, and they all suddenly gain this like love for the West and Israel. Thank you for striking my hospital and, killing my family. Like that's legitimately what they were thinking. Instead, right now in Iran, we're seeing like protests calling for more missile strikes on Israel, calling for support of the government, calling for like it's the exact opposite of what they wanted. Like Bibi was literally saying like "Za Zindagi," right? The chant that they had for the anti-hijab protests. And so many people are doing the exact opposite in the streets of Iran now. They're standing with their government, and even people from reports that I've read from people who live in Iran, even people who are against the government have come out vehemently against Israeli strikes because they know more than anything that this is an attack on the Iranian people, not the government itself. It's an attack on everybody.
Yeah. Well, it's funny, like the Netanyahu will come out and they did this with Gaza too and with Lebanon. They're like, we have no problem with the people and the civilians here. Our issues with your leaders. But, then of course their actions speak otherwise. And you can't forget the very, very deep, deep racism on all levels of Israeli society. This really isn't a new way of looking at Middle Eastern countries. It's something that the European powers were very good at, formulating this idea of Oriental despotism, or, like if you look at what the British said about the Nawab of Awadh in like modern day Lucknow in UP. They would write like whole books about how he would fly his kites all day and how he was so lazy and how he was this kind of tyrant that, the people must resent him. They must hate him. And they kind of projected this view that, well, we're actually helping people by giving them a new leadership that's, of course, subservient to us. And I think the Israelis have really the Israelis exemplify all of these old, European colonial attitudes and techniques. They're not as familiar to us now because, with the exception of certain instances like the U.S. invasion of Iraq and things like that, but it's not as prevalent as it was back in the 19th century, for instance. Um, but that whole view isn't new. It's like, well, they're living under the tyranny of these mullahs, and they all want freedom, and it's a tiny, tiny minority of them that just have their boot on the necks of everyone else, and it's just driven by I think basic racism, and of course like an underlying desire to push Iran out as a regional power player, but the racism is a helpful tool.
Yeah, I mean, it really is the white man's burden repackaged, isn't it? Like these people can't rule themselves. The woman needs saving. I mean, I think one thing that's never
I
talked.
wouldn't say it's repackaged at all. I wouldn't say they repackaged it even.
Yeah, honestly, it's very blatant and open. Like these people are too stupid to rule themselves. We need to rule them and develop them and teach them how to govern. That really is a lot of Israeli propaganda towards Gaza, towards Palestinians, towards Iranians. And the thing is, like, one thing that's never talked about is like under the Pavalis, um, hijabs were banned, and that was actually immensely unpopular with the majority of Iranian people, including women. When
Yeah.
they voted, when the new government came in, and when they voted to make hijabs mandatory, that was overwhelmingly popularly voted in. I mean, the Pahlavi secret police would go into poor women's houses if they suspected them of having hijabs. They would harass them. I mean, they had a brutal secret police. And, oftentimes we get
Yeah.
pictures of Iran before the Islamic Revolution. And they're these like nice middle class, upper class women getting educations. But under the Shah, Iran had one of the worst wealth inequalities of any society on earth. That was not how the
Yeah.
average Iranian woman or Iranian person lived. They lived in destitute poverty. They were harassed by secret police. Their secret police would brutally torture people. And again, the hijab was banned unpopularly, and the police would harass women who wore hijabs. And so, Iranian society has come around on the hijab issue. I mean, now they're on the opposite end where like a lot of people actually want to be against the mandatory hijab laws, and they've actually successfully through their protests gotten some laxation on those laws, especially like in Tehran now. Like you can see like videos of like women barely wearing a headscarf or even going around without a headscarf. But the thing is, like, this white man's burden narrative doesn't work really, right? Like, it manufactures a history that doesn't even exist. Like, this idea that Iran was successful under the Shah or the Pahlavis doesn't even translate to a reality.
Yeah. I mean, um, obviously there's like an enormous amount of legitimate criticisms of the Iranian government, but it just doesn't like it doesn't concern people outside the country. It's just that simple. Think about how unpopular a figure like Trump is. The average American who hates Trump would be much more against another country installing a new government. Like uh, the issues of like institutions and civil society and politics of Iran are the Iranian people's responsibility and destiny, and it's their choice. But what we have here is a desire by the Western powers through Israel to impose this kind of Shah dictatorship onto people in order to have access to its resources, in order to bring it into a certain domain of capital.
On the home front in America too, the propaganda kind of faltered and fell flat on its face. Well, first of all,
Yeah.
in America, the protests were waving Iranian flags and saying no war with Iran. In Iran, the protests were saying we love the government, strikes on Israel. I mean, you can already see which government has popular support, or like at least a people with a will to fight, and which government doesn't. And they tried
Well,
to.
and that's mainly like that's the most successful mechanism they've been able to really utilize is using Palestine as an issue and basically saying like we're the only government that's willing to stand up to Israel. So there's also like a certain cynical motivation there, but that doesn't change the fact that this war does nothing but bring like a lot more popularity to the government.
Yeah. Yeah, and like as communists, obviously the IRGC. Wait, is it called the IRGC? Is that the
That's
abbreviation?
the IRGC is sort of like the PLA, but then there's also the army. It's actually really inefficient and kind of dumb, like in my opinion. But the idea is that the IRGC protects the ideals and goals of the Iranian Revolution and protects the leadership and maintains the regime, whereas the regular army is concerned with defense of the territory. And then they also have I'm not going to pronounce it right, but it's spelled like Basich, which is like a youth service volunteer organization that helps. It's like paramilitary, helps with like all kinds of things, disaster relief, whatever. But the issue is like there's an IRGC Navy and there's an Army Navy and there's a IRGC Army and there's an Army. So it was actually kind of inefficient like division. Whereas in a place like China, the People's Liberation Army is the only army and it serves the party, but also for the defense of China. So it's that's a whole thing. But
Mm.
anyhow,
I mean, yeah, no, but like obviously as communists, we're not fans of the Islamic government, but we can easily say like Iranian people deserve to govern themselves. I mean, it's up to them whether or not they want to overthrow the government. This sort of Western need to like impose our will onto like this white man's burden. I mean, it is just the white man's burden. Ultimately, what came out of this war? I mean, Israel got decimated, in my opinion. I mean, buildings destroyed, critical military sites hit, Israeli
yeah,
psychology broken, right? Like their sense of safety is now completely shattered. Um,
yeah, that's the thing is like you can bombing Iran will make people in Iran more upset and more indignant towards Israel and support the military more. Missiles hitting Israel will result in them becoming fearful and eventually probably leaving. I mean, there's been informal estimates by top leadership that since October 7th, 1 million Israelis have left. It's probably less than that, but either way, a substantial amount of people have already left. And this is going to be more, because they want to live in like Miami, basically. They don't, um, it's not a very deeply rooted society, it's like a settlement. So they don't, people in Iran are going to be very tenacious and very willing to fight for their country in a way that Israelis aren't.
Yeah, and also it goes back to the settlertariat. I mean, the settlertariat is so
Mhm.
privileged. I mean, they cannot handle anything that disrupts their privileges. And
Mhm.
Iran has done is like shattered the settlertariat's treats, right? Like when you when you disrupt the treat flow and like the treatler classes flow, they get scared. They can't stand it anymore. I mean, you saw videos coming out of Israeli bomb shelters. They're fucking fighting each other. They're yelling at each other. They're pushing and shoving
Yeah.
each other. This is a barely held together society. The only thing that really held together these settlers is the constant flow of resources that they get from killing Palestinians, stealing their land, yada yada. The constant flow of capital from the U.S., though it's mostly towards their military sector, but it does boost Israel's economy like immensely.
The
And
tech sector, yeah.
yeah, yeah, the tech sector too. Hey, there's tons of companies that invest within Israel. Um,
Yeah.
the only thing that holds them together is this, and other than that, and like hatred of Arabs, Palestinians. But other than that, if they didn't have these things, they're a completely divided society. There's so many groups within Israel that hate each other. They can't even go like a month without killing each other because they mistake like a Mizrahi for a Palestinian or something, or like a Christian, or like it's crazy.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it feels like the end of the beginning of the end, like, like there was this kind of whole stage up until the war where things were sort of deteriorating, and now we've sort of reached a new stage, but the deterioration will continue in some form. I mean, Ilan Pape, I think, seems pretty convinced that it's sort of in the death spiral. And part of what I think explains the really egregious violence that we're seeing now towards aid seekers in Gaza is the knowledge that the writing is on the wall and that this is not a sustainable project. So it's hard to say that's a good thing because it's still probably going to be, it could be more than a decade that the state is around, probably in a state of pretty constant war, um, at the expense of Palestinians and Lebanese and, possibly even Jordanians and Egyptians. We'll see. Certainly Syrians too, but and Iranians. But the state is in a bit of a death spiral. I mean, the thing about the United States is the United States was able to bring over such a massive amount of settlers and consolidate territorial control over such a large area and build, just such a large economic infrastructure that it was able to sustain itself. And Israel wants to do that, but they've already sort of artificially limited like the amount of settlers they can take in, to a pretty small group of people globally speaking. It's not like the U.S. where you could have Italians, Germans, English, Irish, whoever just coming in, and adding to the settler population, and therefore the legitimacy of the colonial project. Here you have like a situation where actually a lot of younger, educated people are leaving because they don't want to go to war constantly. They don't want to, deal with, a lot of, there's been huge academic boycotts. um, a lot of Israeli researchers can't really do research with people in other colleges, and so they'll leave if they want to do more research. It's a pretty bad situation for the colonial project, really. Um,
I mean,
and then,
it's dying a death by a thousand cuts. Really, like it's small cuts, but it's dying a death by a thousand cuts.
mhm,
Um,
yeah,
yeah, no, I mean, I think it's been revealed by Haaretz, which is an Israeli news site, this morning that IDF soldiers have been ordered to shoot at Palestinians going towards aid distribution sites. Obviously, all Palestinians have been put into basically 4 safe zones. All the aid distribution sites are in basically kill zones. So once Palestinians enter those sites, they are, their IDF has open orders to kill anybody who enters there, and they have no safety there. And so, yeah, no, I think you're right. It is a death spiral, and it's a very desperate, disgusting death spiral. I mean, they're getting desperate and genocidal in a way that I don't think it reminds me of the final solution in Germany. It came towards the end of the Nazi regime when shit was getting rough. I mean, when the writing was on the wall, and they're sort of doing the same exact thing. I mean, the final solution didn't begin at the beginning of the Nazis when everything was good and the economy was being revitalized, and
they wanted to deport Jewish people. Thing like, yeah, towards the beginning, like they had concentration camps, but for the large bulk of Jewish people, they were still talking about wanting to deport them to, different places.
Yeah. Yeah. And then now they're getting just like openly genocidal. I mean, they're getting towards the final solution part of their project. I mean, it has been the final solution part of their project since October 7th, really. Um,
Yeah, it's really sad, if you look at, I was looking at Pablo, Picasso's painting Guernica the other day about the, Nazi bombing of the Basque town of Guernica, in the Spanish Civil War, and, it's really, really sad how, how little we learned, I guess.
yeah. Yeah, I mean, that is just, I think, the nature of capitalism. We're doomed to repeat these Holocausts and fascist experiments and the rise of fascism over and over again, as long as the crisis of capital exists. I mean, really, falling rates of profit, inequality, monopolization, imperialism. I mean, all these things just lead to a repeating cycle. I mean, really. And well, I will say, the future of warfare is scary for two reasons. First of all, because Israel has sort of set a new bar for what you were allowed to do, in terms of
Yeah.
killing the
What you can
enemy.
get
And
away with.
yeah, yeah, pretty much. But also, I mean, the Russo-Ukraine war has set a new bar in terms of the technology of warfare, and it's drone warfare, right? These kamikaze drones connected to like meters long, like thousands of meter long wire, like fiber optics cable, so they can't be hacked. That
Mhm.
come in and bomb targets. Um, it's horrific. I mean, these two wars are setting a new standard for future wars that are just going to be awful. I mean, awful. I mean, the future of humanity in terms of just whatever basic humanitarian law we could pretend we had is not looking good.
Yeah, it's also just like what with Gaza too, it's just like in this world of like, where there are gonna be lots of climate change refugees, just like what can we get away with? Seems to be sort of the attitude. It's really disturbing. And then with, a lot of especially on the left, the Ukraine war isn't talked about as much because it gets so much coverage in the bourgeois media. But yeah, I mean, it's really gonna go down as one of the biggest wastes of human life ever. I mean, it's pretty awful.
Yeah. Yeah, and the writing is pretty much on the wall, I think, news media slowly but surely. I mean, when you have Piers Morgan questioning Israelism or Zionism, I think that's sort of your indicator that, um, even though this conflict may keep on going, this genocide might keep on going for a couple more years, which horrific as it sounds, I think is likely. There's no slowing down. I think the writing is on the wall for terms of like international support for the Israeli project, even within liberal circles. Like liberal circles are slowly but surely shifting against Israel.
Yeah. I mean, and also Piers Morgan is a really, really good grifter, so he knows where people's minds are going.
Yeah, yeah. I Moving on, to the ICE protests, I think this was also sort of a defining moment for America. Basically, on June 6th, ICE agents conducted raids in Los Angeles, the Fashion District, other locations, and it just erupted into a mass anti-ICE protests all across the city. 2,000 National Guards had to be deployed. Um, LA was essentially put under martial law. There was a curfew and everything. And so, I mean, I think really people are just getting fed up of seeing their neighbors, their friends, getting arrested for being undocumented migrants. And even then, I mean, documented migrants and people who are here legally are getting arrested. I mean, it's so lax how they enforce these laws.
Yeah, I mean, I wrote an essay about this called "The White Genocide Conspiracy is Now Public Policy," and I think that really was what hit me, in terms of coming to that conclusion because this is all driven by basically an attitude of this should be a country for whites only. It's pretty out in the open. It's pretty blatant. We're no longer dealing with a um, kind of we just care about law and order, we just want good immigrants, we don't want criminals kind of attitude. This is just very plainly, we want white tenants in our white communities attitude, really driven by and architected by Stephen Miller, who despite his Jewish ethnicity, is disgracefully an American neo-Nazi, essentially. So, yeah, I think it's definitely pretty concerning.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think the thing really is that, it's nativism again, and America's had episodes of nativism every time capital is in crisis, right? We had anti-German nativism, we had anti-Irish nativism, we had anti-Italian nativism, and, I mean, America always needs a scapegoat for its, policies. I mean, people are in the worst living crisis they've ever seen before, especially after the 2020s, with inflation and wages not rising to keep up with that inflation, more people than ever are facing foreclosures, losing their homes, becoming homeless, not being able to afford things like they used to be able to afford again. Like, the basic cost of living are eating up their budgets now, where they aren't able to get even the smallest luxuries anymore. And so I think a neo-nativism really helps. I mean, Mexicans are the issue, and Muslims are the issue, and whatever, this person is the issue. It really helps unite the nation, and the working class, with the bourgeoisie, rather than a class antagonism against the bourgeoisie. And I think that is one of the special things about America as a multiracial society, where the bourgeoisie are easily able to play off the working classes, ethnicities, to keep them from fighting the bourgeoisie themselves. I mean, that's why I think our workers' movements have always been so weak to some extent, right? Because it's so easy to just divide white workers, Mexican workers, black workers. Some of America's earliest workers' movements were white only, right? Like, it's ridiculous. Things like that.
Yeah, I think also, it does at the same time feel like a bit of a watershed moment because this is directed at all non-white groups of people in America, basically. Things like the Mexican repatriation during the Great Depression, where Mexican Americans were blamed, for the Great Depression and and a lot of them were deported. Like I think 2 million or so were deported, especially out of LA. So, you could say that echoes of this, but that was at the end of the day directed at a specific community in a way that doesn't really line up with this, which is like a general, you know, no, 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 anyone who's not white, isn't illegal to us. And, I mean, the only silver lining is that they're all incredibly incompetent leaders. So, this isn't like Mussolini's brown shirts that are going to be able to really like commandeer everything, but it's certainly really dire. I mean, there really isn't much left to say. I think there's some interesting like scholarly analyses of the Trump administration, which argue that Trump is not fascist, he's Bonapartist, or he's a Bonapartist with fascist elements. But whatever the hell you want to call it, it's certainly white nationalist, and it's certainly concerning. And I can't imagine that the country will really be the same after this.
Yeah, I mean, I think also it shows that a large part of the American proletariat is sort of rejecting this nativism, right? I mean, obviously, America is more diverse than ever, especially LA, and especially younger people. I mean, Gen Z is overwhelmingly Hispanic, and that just keeps on going up. And when you're arresting and deporting like people who are drug traffickers or people who are involved in some kind of criminal activity, yeah, sure, like, you can sell it to the nation, and people will be quiet, and people will quietly accept it. But when you're deporting foster care kids, when you're deporting, people at their jobs at construction sites, when you're d and people who are in the community, who people talk to, people who are friends and neighbors and things like that. And when you're arresting kids who are here illegally, like teenagers who are here legally, born here, it becomes impossible for your propaganda to work. It becomes impossible to dehumanize them. And so I think what LA did was it showed, and these protests spread all across the nation, it showed that the vast majority of Americans are rejecting what the bourgeoisie are pushing out. And really, I think American society right now is divided into two camps. People who defend the status quo, sort of like the old, and people who are part of the new, like the emerging, right? The new emerging ideas. And the new emerging ideas overwhelmingly have popular organic support. People who are with the old, right, like people who are pro ICE or police or whatever, are overwhelmingly part of an institutional, sort of dead thing that has to be funded by Fox News and government programs. I don't know, propaganda like that.
Yeah, well, the arrogance of especially the right wing intelligentsia is pretty astounding because, and not to diminish the virulent racism in the MAGA base, realistically speaking, the average person in the MAGA movement um, is not on board with neo-Nazism. They're just not on board with like we're gonna get everyone. We must secure a future for white children. All this like really authoritarian fascist shit that a lot of the people in the Trump administration or in the right wing intelligentsia in general do support. They sort of have this idea that immigrants are taking their jobs, they're committing crimes, making the country unsafe, and we just need to get rid of those people. And of course, this is racist in itself, but yeah, like you said, as soon as you kind of take the mask off and just go like, for example, like talking about, Republicans talking about deporting Zoran Mamdani. I mean, the average MAGA voter is just like, well, what the hell? This guy's like a crazy communist, but you can't just deport anyone you don't like. You know what I mean? Like they still have some idea of, um, like the old America where there was this pretend kind of veneer of liberal democracy and rights, like so that's dividing them. The other thing that's really divided the MAGA movement is Iran because the Republican establishment is foaming at the mouth for a war with Iran. And it's probably still likely to happen. I mean, I can't imagine that Israel doesn't start that one up again as soon as BB gets in some more legal trouble um, or something like that. But the MAGA base is going to say, no, 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 we do not want to go to war with Iran for Israel. That's what they're going to say. And so then you have this really disorganized right. And yeah, I think hopefully an opportunity on the left which seems to be sort of unifying around what the moment demands a little bit, but we'll see what happens.
I mean, the Statue of Liberty literally has the fucking quote, like, "Give me your huddled masses," or whatever, and, like, I don't know, it's, like, it's so stupid, like, America propaganda has always been like, "Oh, this is a country where anybody can come in and be successful and yada yada," and now it's just like and of course, I don't think that was ever true, really. I mean, I think America's always been a racist, nativist society, but, I mean, yeah, I mean, you are right to some extent. To another extent, I would say there is a large part of the base that is racist, that does not care, that does genuinely see, like, sort of like a Western, society failing and, this idea of great replacement, whether or not they
Yeah.
recognize they
But
believe in great
those people tend to be like middle class, upper middle class, wealthy, and like intellectual to some extent.
Mm.
The average MAGA voter is, you know, working class MAGA voter. It's just like, I just want prices to go down, a better job, whatever. That makes sense. It's the immigrants' fault. I don't really like them. They're not really they haven't like read the theory of fascism. They don't really get into all that shit. But it's like it's the intelligentsia of the right that really pushes that.
Yeah, I mean, it's been transmuted to them to some extent through or filtered to you to some extent, but they don't really ideologically, yeah. I mean, also, a lot of people who voted for Trump didn't actually, I think, genuinely believe that he was gonna do half the shit he did. Like, they just thought he was capping. Like, he just says shit on the debate stage, or like the speech stage. Um, and that's true. I mean, he does just say some shit that he never does sometimes. He just postures. But I think like especially like Latinos for Trump and things like that, where a lot of people now are angry that like, oh, my husband's been deported or my husband's been caught by ICE, or even though he was here legally or he was trying to get here legally. I think he's really thrown a wrench into his base by actually going through with the shit he said he was gonna do, where like they thought he wasn't gonna do it.
Yeah.
Um, moving on, in New York, we've had a landslide election victory in the Democratic primary. He's still not mayor yet. He's still got a long road ahead of him. But Zoran Mamdani has won the election as a Democratic socialist, an open Democratic socialist. And this has just sent reverberations all throughout the country and all throughout the political spectrum. And there's been a lot of talk, I think, amongst communists about whether this is good, whether this is not good. What's your take on it?
Um, yeah, I mean, I think it's definitely good. Um, but I think it's encouraging in two ways. One, it shows that there's a lot of interest in left politics. Um, a lot of that was driven by a lot of the New York City transplants and kind of students that are getting hit by cost of living a little bit too. And like they were all gentrifying, Puerto Rican and black neighborhoods, and people who were hit by prices and cost of living way before them. So people bring up a lot of valid criticisms in that sense, which is that there's a little bit of like a you know well, maybe you could say a lack of political self-awareness. But at the end of the day, I think, that doesn't mean that he won't be helpful to everyone. We'll just have to see. Um, and it also shows like an actual organic interest. And also you have to remember, like, people people forget, especially people who are younger like us, like the word socialist was a total dirty word in American politics until basically Bernie Sanders. And all of us have plenty of issues with Bernie. You can call him a liberal, and you can say like sock Dems are stupid or whatever, and social democracy doesn't work. And of course there's plenty of criticisms of Bernie. We do have to understand that like it's not like tomorrow everyone's gonna be joining like the peasant uprising, the like incremental bits of interest like this do help. And then you have interesting things where like the Democratic and Republican establishments freak out because of him. And I've seen like even like Asmongold. I'm pretty sure Asmongold voted for him because he's the one guy who didn't make his whole thing about Israel. And Republicans who are like, sure, maybe this guy's like I totally don't agree with this guy, but like what he's supposed to be like the most evil, like they're calling him like a jihadist, like most racist stuff imaginable. And he kind of adds like a friendly face to democratic socialism. Of course, democratic socialism is deeply flawed, but um I do think it's good in a number of ways. It's just like has to be caveated, and a lot of people are doing that.
I mean, obviously, democratic socialism as communist, it's a limited framework. You can never vote away capitalism or get rid of its issues. But I think Mamdani really shows his victory really shows a rejection, first of all, of the Democratic Party, right, and the Democrat Republican binary, and an organic move of the American masses towards an alternative and a leftist alternative, even if it is democratic socialism. Um, the fact that, Americans are rejecting for the first time Democrats and Republicans and looking for an alternative is a very good sign for the left. And I think it opens up an immeasurable amount of space for communists, Maoists, whatever, like radicals to organize for the first time across the national stage. I mean, it shows national and nationally, of course, that Americans are for the first time rejecting Democrats as a legitimate opposition to Trump or Republicans, or as a legitimate alternative, or leftist alternative. And really, I think that's due to two things. Well, first of all, because Democrats have never been able to solve fundamentally the cost of living crisis, the issues of capitalism. I mean, they've really been pretending that neoliberalism is great, right? Like Kamala's whole campaign was just like, "Hey, the economy's great. We're not gonna change anything." Like, what the fuck is that? Like, no, that's not inspiring to anybody. But also, Democrats have faltered so hard at resisting Trump, like they don't know how the fuck to do it. And it's because they refuse to do it along economic lines. All they can fight is a cultural war. They can't fight Trump economically because that hurts the donor base, that hurts their multimillionaire, billionaire donors, and the multi-billionaire donors do not want to get taxed. And so they will rather have the Democrats fight like a failing, weird cultural campaign against Trump that doesn't really work, rather than an economic alternative. And I think the fact that Zoran, he offers, well, first of all, he offers a resounding pushback to Trump economically, like it's promising massive welfare increases, buses, rent freezes, things like that, but also uses the word socialist and ignites a youth base, shows that Americans for the first time are rejecting Democrats. This is a great thing, I think, for communists, as long as we're not like, uh, we're not like, under the illusion that democratic socialism can actually like, change anything, right? Like obviously it can't, but it shows a great little breakthrough in the American politics.
Yeah, I will say too, like, and also in general, the left is not about idolizing people or making them, into like t-shirts and heroes. Like, it's a project, collective project of lots of different people um, and so on. But I think I will say it is incredible how good he is at answering questions. I mean, I've definitely seen some questions where I thought, oh, he's probably gonna mess, especially about Israel, where they try to get some kind of gotcha, and it's just been crazy. He really has an incredible way of answering things perfectly, and he knows his audience really, really well, really well. It's quite impressive, and if he becomes the mayor, I I think he'll probably have a pretty sensational, career. He might run for senator or might end up becoming a presidential candidate in, like, 10 years or whatever. I mean, who knows? Because, he's certainly very talented as a politician. Like, the fact that they haven't been able to get any real gotchas and they put so much into attacking him is quite impressive.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think right now we're already seeing the Democratic establishment reject him. They're getting Cuomo to keep running as an independent. They're getting the last mayor to run a reelection campaign. What the fuck is his name? Eric Adams? Yeah, yeah, Mayor Eric Adams. He's rerunning. So really, I mean, they're trying to pull out all the stops to stop him from winning. But honestly, I think even Zoran winning the Democratic primary is a break in terms of American politics. Like it's a break in a hegemony and a absolute power that these two binary politics have ruled over American society, like liberalism, right? The two flavors of liberalism. It's a crack through those breaks that for the first time in decades. I mean, it does show a great, a promising future for the left, honestly. And
Yeah, and I think also, like,
go ahead.
you have a guy like Bernie where he definitely talks a lot about the American working class and, some democratic socialist policies, but he, especially in foreign policy, never really acknowledged, the extent of, exploitation of the global south, obviously things like Gaza and so on and so forth. Feels like Zoran actually, situates himself in that context a lot better and understands a lot of that. And at the same time, he's a very nice, funny, kind of empathetic person. Really is pretty remarkable. I really didn't expect someone like this to emerge. And again, like you have to criticize, people and so on and so forth. But it is definitely an interesting moment.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I just say take the W for now. There's an alternative being sort of paved through, and yeah, like I get all the communists who are saying, oh, he's a controlled opposition, or democratic socialism or social democrats are ultimately servants of the bourgeoisie, and yada yada, and reforms can't work. And I agree with all of that. But I'm saying is that Zoran's win is a crack in decades long of capitalism, and it is showing the American people want alternatives, and we can be that alternative. I mean, this is a space that is perfect for communists, honestly, and especially if Zoran fails, I think at getting his reforms, that's a perfect
Mhm.
opportunity for communists to step in and say, "Well, social democracy doesn't work, democratic socialism doesn't work, reforming the system doesn't work. Join the Marxist-Leninist side, like hit the blunt, hit take the pill. I don't know what it's I don't know.
Yeah.
Some metaphor. Yeah. Other than that, I think that's all the major. Oh, dude, the racism towards Zoran has been crazy though since he won. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. All the conservative commentators have just been going wild, especially Charlie Kirk.
Yeah.
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 Yeah, it's just been insane. Pictures of Statue of Liberty. I mean, even politicians openly calling for his representatives, calling for his deportation. I mean, it's just been insane. Charlie Kirk's
Yeah.
gotten on. He said like Muslims haven't materially benefited the West at all, and we need to stop legal migration too now. So like he's sort of gone full mask off. Like
Yeah.
his stick used to be like I'm against illegal immigrants. I'm not against illegal immigrants. But now he's like, yeah, no, fuck the legal immigrants.
Yeah.
So it's definitely and everybody's bringing up 9/11. Like they're like, how could New York forget 9/11 and elect a Muslim mayor? It's just the most blatant, disgusting racism that like isn't even worth like uh, like disproving or something like that because it's so anti-intellectual.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. But I think that's typical. I think that's typical. Honestly, it was gonna happen no matter
Yeah.
what. You know.
Yeah.
Well, that's all the news I can think of. You got anything else on your mind?
I mean, those definitely were the 3 big ones. Um, yeah, definitely I
America
got to say
struck
a lot more, but
Somalia. Amer
sorry?
America struck Somalia, so
Oh, yeah, yeah.
yeah, yeah.
And then there's also, Cambodia and Thailand.
What's going on with them?
Is they have, like, a really long-standing border dispute, and it's, like, escalating a little bit. Um, yeah, I guess, like
What side are you on in that petty conflict?
I don't know, I wouldn't say there's a right side, but people can make up their own mind, basically, it's a border dispute over, like, um, archaeological site and, some other things as well. Um, but periodically, it's, like, flared up, especially in 2008. Um, and also there's concerns that there's going to be another coup in Thailand, which is, I think there's been, like, an absurd amount of military coups in Thailand since its formation, so, uh, that'd be interesting. But, yeah, I mean, the Myanmar Civil War, um, yeah, is,
Pakistan kind of came out on top in the Iran-Israel conflict a little bit,
yeah,
right?
I definitely think Pakistan, China, Russia, Iran, North Korea are, yeah, they're sort of winning right now, but we'll see what happens.
Yeah. Oh, I mean, that's the news. All right. Any final words?
Uh, yeah,
Uh,
yeah, there
yeah.
you go.
The world is kind of a fuck. All right. Take care, Henry.
Yeah.
This episode of the Pokepreet Pod has been brought to you by our generous members on our Patreon. If you'd like to become one of them, go to patreon.com/thepokepreetpod. Thank you. What the fuck? Glory to Stalin. I barely made it.